Hello humans, and welcome back to another in-depth Engage video. As the creator of the world-famous Are Master Classes Worth It and Are Advanced Classes Meta videos from back in the Three Houses days, I figured it was only fitting that I followed up with a class guide for Fire Emblem Engage as well. This one probably won't be split into two sections. I'm covering everything in one video, so it might be a longer one, but I'll try to make it as smooth and as easy to understand as possible. As always, I'm human, so sometimes I make mistakes or I miss things, so if there's anything I've missed that you're sure and have tested, please let me know in the comments below. Also, likes and comments in general are really appreciated and have been helping me grow the channel a lot recently, and I'm really thankful for everyone's support, honestly. I really can't emphasize how much it means to me. Also, subscribe, because I sat down this morning and wrote down 10 video ideas that I'm hoping to put out, all of which you definitely don't want to miss. Anyways, I know my intros are always long, but if you've been around, then you're used to it, so let's get started. First off, I want to do a general table of contents kind of overview of what to expect in this video, and there will be timestamps both on the video and in the description, so you can go to the parts you want. But I'm going to start with some general information about the class system, then I'll talk quickly about the base classes, and then we'll move on to a more detailed look at the advanced classes because they're more important and you'll be in those for a longer period of time. I'm also only going to do generic classes in this video, otherwise it'll double in length for all the specific ones in the game. If you guys do like this breakdown and really want to see one for the uniques, then let me know in the comments and I'll think about doing one. Alright, so some general information about how the class system works in this game. There are base classes, and at level 10 you can go to the secondary class that has the specific progression from that base class. For example, you can't be a sword fighter and then decide to go into Mage Knight. You have to be a level 10 mage in the mage class to do that. So my base tip for anyone planning out their class progression, make sure you're in the right base class. The second biggest tip, and I've been saying this quite a bit, and there's a little bit of pushback by people who like to grind skirmishes and are complaining about it, but I stand by this, you can and should promote instantly at level 10. This game has an internal level counter for each unit, and your XP will scale based off that. Advanced classes have better growths and give you access to better weapon coverage and class skills, so promoting will give you an immediate strength boost. If you hit level 20 in your advanced class, you can just use a second seal to go back to level 1 of the same class or any other class you want, so you do not lose out on any levels. You can infinite loop. Also, weapon rank works very differently in this game to any of the other ones. The weapon rank you have is entirely dependent on the class you are in, except the one you have in blue on your character in the little bottom left corner. That is character specific, and it will increase your weapon rank in a specific class by 1. The last tip I want to give here is to use your bond points to inherit proficiencies in the arena as soon as you can in order to plan out your early base class second sealing after Chapter 8. You get Leaf after Chapter 8, and he has every weapon proficiency in the game except fists. So you can use him to make any unit you want, change into any class you want, except Martial Monk. The Martial Monk class sucks to go into because there are only 2 sources of fist proficiency in the game. Tiki, who is DLC, and Byleth, who you don't get until well into the mid-game. I think that's all the basic foundational tips I have, so now let's go into the detailed breakdowns. Let's start with the base classes. The first classes we should talk about are the fighter classes. There are 3 types of them, sword, lance, and axe, and this is going to be a common theme for some of the other classes down the line. The difference here is that each one of these classes has different growths, which I'll show on screen as I talk about them. The sword fighter class leans more heavily towards dex, speed, and resistance, and lets you go into the Swordmaster and hero classes. The lance fighter leans more heavily towards dex, defense, and has a small magic growth and lets you go into the Halberdier and Royal Knight classes. The axe fighter class leans towards HP, strength, and lets you go into the warrior and berserker classes. Next is the archer class, which is the only bow-based class in the entire game. It's got a high focus on dex growth with a bit invested in speed and strength. This class lets you bridge into the Sniper or Bow Knight advanced classes. After that, we have the Armored classes. All 3 Armored classes have the exact same growths across the board, and they let you go into either the General or the Great Knight class. One thing to know about the Armor Knight class is that even at base, this class is immune to being broken, so they're very nice crutches for early game tanking and excel at having very high levels of physical defense. Like the Armored classes, the Cavalry classes are all the same growths-wise, but they have 1 more point in movement than all the other base classes. Movement has been nerfed quite a bit in this game, so cavalry units aren't as good as they used to be, but it's a very well-rounded class with exactly 10% added growth in every single stat except magic and build. This class allows you to go into the Paladin class, or a personal favorite of mine, the Wolf Knight. And just to round off the identical growths classes, we have the Flier class. Nothing pisses a Fire Emblem fan off more than gender-locked classes, but I'm pleased to say that this is the only one in the entire game, and it doesn't continue forward to the advanced classes. This class, like the Cavalry class, is more well-rounded, but has less defense and HP in return for having a little bit of magic growth instead. This class lets you go into Griffin Knight or Wyvern Knight. Next up is our Mage base class, which is a really good base class with a fantastic growth boost to magic and resistance. They really beefed up the base magic classes in this game, and anyone with mid to high growths will excel in these classes because of the boost they give. Mage lets you go into Sage or Mage Knight and is a nice class to be in for anyone who wants to do anything magic related in the future. Last but not least is the Martial Monk class, one of the most disappointing classes in the game in my opinion. Fists are incredibly underwhelming, and their damage is a result of a unit's combined magic and strength stats divided by 2 and subtracted by the enemy defense for some reason. I don't know why they did it this way, but anyways, this is our base healer class. It honestly has pretty decent growths, like Mage does, and will let you go into Martial Master or High Priest. This class will most likely be heavily reliant on staff usage for EXP gain though, so don't expect to get many kills with your fists unless you're babying your unit. And that wraps up the base classes. Now time to move on to the advanced and special class, where I'll talk a little bit more in depth about these. I'll also be going in order of base classes listed above and the progression that way, so it'll be sorted like that just so you know how I'm moving. First off, let's start with the Swordmaster class. In terms of growth, it's almost negligible upgrade over the Swordfighter class with only a 5% increase in luck, but the Swordmaster class unlocks S-rank swords for any unit. They also learn the skill Run Through at level 5. I actually really like this skill because it helps with positioning units and making use of the chain attack feature in this game that backup units can use. Since the Swordmaster is a backup unit, you can use Run Through to get on the other side of a unit, freeing up a spot for your next unit to come attack and finish off said unit if it's still alive. This is great for boss killing, especially since they have those multiple HP bars and can help with chipping away at them. The Swordmaster also has the highest speed cap in the game, being 49, meaning that odds are you're going to be dodging a lot of attacks as well as doubling everything in the game. This is a pretty solid class overall, and if you want to use a sword unit, I'd probably recommend you go into this one. Having said that, I still do have to cover the next sword-based class, and that's the Hero class. The Hero class has 2 different options you can choose: swords and lances, or swords and axes, but at the drawback of being capped at A rank in swords and C rank in lances and axes. This is just enough rank to let you use things like killer weapons and hand axes and javelins, but you'll fall short when it comes to some of the higher rank weapons like tomahawks, spears, or silver weapons. The growth variability here is a bit different to Swordmaster, but nothing drastic, with a slightly higher HP and strength, slightly lower dex speed and resistance. The main attraction for the Hero class though is their level 5 skill Brave Assist. If the unit is at full HP and they're involved in a chain attack, they get to go twice in that chain attack. This may not seem like a huge deal, but it really does help when you've got 2 to 3 units chipping away with 10 or 12 damage being done each time. Add to the fact that if they're using javelins and hand axes, they can also follow up, and if you have an army of heroes, you can easily melt boss health bars in pretty much no time. This was actually very helpful for me in the mid game, but late game, once I had very powerful specialized units, I felt like as a whole it kind of fell off a little, but it's still quite the powerful combo. Moving on to the lance-based classes, next we have the Halberdier. I haven't used this class at all personally myself, but it has a pretty good strength growth paired with a great dex growth and average speed. The class also seems to have its growth spread out in every category, to the point where it even has a magic growth for whatever reason. Like Swordmaster, this class is the S-rank lance class and has no other weapon access in exchange for that. Its level 5 skill is called Pincer Attack, and this is actually one of the better ones. As long as there's someone on the opposite side of the enemy and it has to be adjacent, you're guaranteed to do a follow-up attack. Unfortunately, this doesn't work with ranged weapons like javelins and hand axes. Although, this can be extremely powerful when used in the right situations, and weapons such as Brave Lance can be guaranteed to quad even on a slow unit. And I know what you're thinking, what about Great Lances? What about Brave weapons doing more than quadding? And unfortunately, after testing, this just doesn't work. None of the smash weapons are able to follow up, and Brave Lances can only go up to 4 times. So if your unit is already really fast, this won't add any value, and honestly, it won't even activate the skill. Either way, with the right utilization, I actually think this could be quite a powerful class that is pretty overlooked since you don't get any units as lance fighters or who could go into this class naturally. The next lance class is the Royal Knight class, which is quite interesting because they use lances and staves. It's kind of a weird combination, and I assume this is the reason the lance fighter class has a bit of a magic growth. This class has very good balance growths across the board, except in HP, and I don't really have anything bad to say about it. Staff utility is excellent in this game, and with the mobility of it being a cavalry class and having strong melee access, it's probably quite a sleeper class to be honest. The only drawback I see is that their staff rank is stuck at C, so unless your unit has a natural proficiency in staves, you won't be able to use the upper echelon of staves like Warp, Rescue, and Entrap. They get the skill Reforge, which sacrifices 10 HP to restore an adjacent ally from break status, but this is pretty situational, and honestly, I've never really wished I had it for anything, to be honest. Overall, a good utility class with a pretty average skill, and I think it's nice and balanced with utility that's viable through the endgame. The Berserker is the first of the 2-axe classes, and this one is exactly as advertised. It's for units who want to go berserk. This class has the highest strength and HP growths in the game at 30%, as well as the highest HP and strength caps in the game at 96 and 49 respectively. However, the trade-off for this massive power is that it has some of the lowest stat caps in the game, with its speed being at a relatively low 29, and its defense and resistance caps are at a miserable 20 and 11 respectively. The personal skill Smash Plus can be fun, but honestly, knocking an enemy back 2 spaces is rarely what I want to do with this class if I'm attacking. If you want to use this class, you're going to need to be a very specific build, which I'll probably cover in a video at some point soon. I'm still working on it, but honestly, I would just advise you to use the warrior class instead. Speaking of which, let's talk about warriors. The warrior class in Engage actually has very solid growths and some great stat caps if you can hit them. It's nicely well-rounded, and while it won't be a speed demon like some of the sword classes, it'll more than hold its own against enemies in terms of avoiding doubles well into the late game. But what's really great about the warrior class is its access to chain attacks via the longbow. A warrior with a longbow will be able to chain attack anything in a 3-tile radius, making it one of the best chip damage support classes in the entire game. In addition to that, its skill Merciless does 50% bonus damage to broken enemies, making it an amazing class to nuke broken bosses with. If you want a good mix of damage, support, and bulk, this is really a fantastic class that you can't go wrong with in Engage, and I'm glad that warriors have finally gotten some good stuff. Up next is the Sniper class, and honestly, it's not a huge upgrade over Archer. The growth increase is negligible and it doesn't gain any utility aside from it being able to use any S-rank bow. Its personal, though, is fantastic. As long as an enemy can't attack you, you get 10% extra crit chance against them. This is great because if you have a killer bow that is engraved with extra crit chance alongside this, then you're probably going to end up near 100% crit rate. If you reclass Yunaka into this class and put her in a void terrain as well, then there you go, crit machine ahoy. Other than that, this is just a glorified archer, what you see is what you get. The second bow advanced class is Bow Knight, and well, compared to 3 houses, this class just feels underwhelming? I'm not sure if there's some potential I'm missing, but 1 extra movement over Sniper with a class skill that doesn't want you to move sounds very oddly paired. These classes also already have high dexterity, and odds are they'll have near perfect hit rates most of the time, so why in the world would I want this unless I'm trying to hit things on forts or avoid tiles? I was a big advocate of Bow Knight in the previous game, but here, even if it has some pretty nice growths, I feel like the overall potential is kind of wasted. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad class, and you do get access to either swords, axes, or lances as a melee option, so it is nice, but it just kinda has me a little bit flabbergasted. And now we have the General class. Honestly, my first thoughts about this class is that it's not really that great. There are a lot of mages in this game toward the end portions of it, and I don't know about you guys, but the further in I get, the less I've been worrying about getting broken. It also still has only 4 move even after promotion, and the growth gains you get here aren't great either. Its personal skill is Swap, which is actually quite useful. Due to movement being low overall in Engage, Swap can help generals move an extra space while also getting an ally out of harm's way. The only problem is they're going to have to catch up to said ally in order to do that in the first place, so it is a trade-off. Otherwise, they really don't have any added utility here, it's just a beefier Armor Knight that is still locked to only 1 weapon type, and I personally opted to go the Great Knight route instead myself. So let's talk about Great Knight. This is a Cavalry class, so any Armor Knight upgrading into this gains 2 more movement to get to 6 move, as well as having an additional proficiency in whichever of axes, swords, or lances that you don't have. However, you sacrifice the Unbreakable skill, and now can be broken just like any other class. Like I said previously, I didn't see too much of an issue with being broken later on in the game, as I started to kind of plan around it and had more units to make use of, so this felt like the natural progression. You get to keep most of your bulk you earned as an Armor Knight, but now with easier mobility. Its skill, Allied Defense, is also pretty nice for tanking purposes, since as long as you're in between an ally and your enemy, you get 3 reduced damage per attack, helping you tank even better. Overall, this is a pretty great tank class, and I used it on my Louis all the way into the end game with some pretty great results. You won't really be doubling anything, but you'll hit pretty hard and can be used as a breaker. Even though you can get access to mounted classes through other types, it's time to talk about the pure mounted classes, and the first is Paladin. Paladin in this game, for some reason, is a specialized class that only has access to one weapon type, but none of them S rank. At one point in Fire Emblem, the Paladin was the weapon triangle master, and oh no, how far we've fallen. But honestly, it's not a bad class here and has some really nicely balanced growths. Its skill pivot, which lets it go its full 6 movement, and then jump over another unit to extend its effective range to 8, is quite nice as well. Of course, they can't attack after, but it's some nice potential. Other than that, there's nothing special about this class. It's well-rounded, and you can't really go wrong with going into it. The other mounted class, though, is one of my favorites, as I mentioned in my intro, and that's the Wolf Knight class. This class is really cool, and I use that word for 2 reasons. 1, because I actually really love the class, but 2, because Marin is all about cool and she's the poster girl for Wolf Knight. The growths here are great, but this class does lack strength growth, so you want to be wary of that. You can also have any of swords, axes, or lances, but promoting into it also gives you access to daggers, which are some of the best weapons in the game. In addition to that, their personal skill Hobble is really funky. After you hit an enemy, they lose 2 movement, which might not seem like much, but if you pair this skill with Canter or Canter Plus, you can get out of range of all infantry and armored units, which lets you hit and run very effectively. It can also help keep your backline units safe if they're in any danger by limiting enemy movement to only a few squares. I love this class. I'm biased, I love Marin too, so I'm double biased, and honestly, everyone should try this class out because it's really fun and has fantastic animations. Just like the previous section, we're rounding out our traditional physical classes with the Fliers. In Engage, the Falcon Knight class is gone, and instead we have Griffin Knight. They have solid growths all around, including a 10% magic growth, and like I said earlier, it's not gender locked, so any male characters can second seal into this if they have the right proficiencies. Griffin Knights are like flying Royal Knights, except they can use any of swords, axes, or lances in addition to their C-rank staves. It has the same drawbacks as Royal Knights do in the staff department, so I won't repeat myself here. Their skill, Clear the Way, can honestly be quite interesting as it makes it so that things like forest tiles are treated as normal movement tiles for allies. Some other obstructive tiles like the fog generated from Corrin's Emblem Ring or any fire on the map from various effects are all things that are helped by this as well. Other than that, it's just your basic Flyer class. Speaking of basic Flyer classes, Wyvern Knight is here too. It's pretty much the same as it always has been in Fire Emblem, with good strength and bulk, but on the slower end with less res growths-wise. It has access to 2 weapon types out of swords, axes, and lances, and their proficiencies are A or B depending on your primary. For some reason, they gave it a speed-based skill in Air Raid that gives you +5 speed if you're initiating from a tile that normal units wouldn't be able to traverse. On units that need a bit to go over the double threshold, this is quite nice, but honestly, combat on those kinds of terrain is pretty rare, and I can't find many situations where I even use this skill. Otherwise, it's pretty much your classic flying class, can't really go wrong with it here either. Time for magic-based classes now. First of these is the Sage class, which is the class with the highest magic growth and cap in the game at 30% and 48%. This class hits really hard, and has some good growths for that power, but that's pretty much it. The skill is kind of weird because it not only wants you to have more tome units, but they also need to be adjacent, and you only get 1 attack per ally. I think this skill is absolutely tragic, and I don't see how you realistically use this consistently or even get much benefit out of it. It does give you S-rank tomes to be in this class, but honestly, I'd rather just go into Mage Knight. So let's talk about Mage Knight. For some reason, they made a hybrid magic and physical class, but it's obvious this class is mostly focused on magic, and honestly, I'm glad it is because it's really good. Mage Knight still keeps the high magic and resistance growths that the Sage has, though 5% less, but instead sprinkles a little bit of love towards HP, strength, speed, and defense as well. It also has 1 more movement and a much better skill in Chaos style. If you're using magic against a melee unit or vice versa, you basically get an extra 3 speed. Honestly, this is one of the best class skills in the game, and I don't see why every class wasn't treated as nicely as Mage Knights were. I know people like to use sages, and that the access to physical weapons here might as well not exist, but honestly guys, come on, Mage Knight is fantastic. It's time for some of the most disappointing classes in the game, and right off the bat, I'm going to start with Martial Master. This class flat out sucks. Fist weapons have some of the worst damage calculations in the game, and while they do help to break bow and tome units, I've never wanted to hit them with fists over using magic, which this class also has access to. The growths here are downright worse than High Priest, and this class also doesn't have staff utility. Also, the access to fist proficiency is non-existent until you get Byleth at pretty much the halfway point of the game, unless you have the Tiki DLC. The Diffuse Healer skill is interesting and can help you in a pinch, but I don't know if it's good enough to pull this class out of the garbage. If anyone sees an upside to this that I haven't seen, let me know, because I sure as hell don't see it. Just use High Priest instead. So here we are at High Priest, and honestly, this class is pretty bad too, because again, it requires Fist proficiency to class into, so the accessibility for anyone not originally in a Martial Monk class, which is 2 units, is really, really hard. However, the growths here at least make sense and are pretty decent, and it has S rank and staves, making it able to make full use of all the amazing staff utility in the game. It also lets you heal yourself with its unique skill, which is a nice little touch. I honestly don't have much bad to say about this class outside of how annoyingly hard it is to get accessibility, but aside from that, it's great for your healers and staff units, and the magic growth lets you do some decent damage too if you want to help with killing enemies. Last but not least, we have the one special class that everyone can go into, and that's the Thief class. Thieves are covert units, which means that their avoid bonuses are double in avoid terrain. However, unlike archers and snipers, they have some really strong 1-2 range weapons throughout the entirety of the game in silver daggers. This class has some pretty decent growths, but its skill pass is pretty underwhelming. Other than that, by virtue of them having the covert boost and being able to take along their own portable terrain generator with Corrin, this means that this class will be excellent regardless of who is in it. It does have a relatively low strength growth though, and with daggers having lower might, you might want to watch out that you're not doing 0 damage to enemies. Alright, I can breathe now and finally go outside and see the sun because that was a long analysis. In all honesty, all of these classes are fairly balanced and valid for a playthrough regardless of what difficulty you're on, aside from Martial Master. Nobody should use that class, and they should be ashamed of themselves for making it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think, and if there's anything I'm overlooking. If you really want me to do the unique classes, speak now or forever hold your peace, and I'll see you all in the next video very soon. Peace.